Welcome, everyone, to the All-City Show, part of the All-NBA podcast. Clearly, I am not Adam Mares, your normal host. I'm Gerald Bourguet, over with the PHNX Sports Show, an affiliate of All-City, and I can think of no better way to ring in the new year than to introduce my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler, someone I have admired from afar for the way that he breaks down the game. Tim, Happy New Year to you. How are you doing today?
Gerald, Happy New Year, man. Good to be on with you. Looking forward to this. I'm doing great, man. I had a relatively tame New Year's Eve, so I'm feeling fresh. And fortunately, had a couple of really interesting games, I think, that where I think we're going to kick this thing off with.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great way to ring in the new year with some of the basketball games we got to enjoy last night. Just a reminder before we get started, the All City Show is presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code ALLNBA because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Well, Tim, let's jump right in with our Weekend Warriors, brought to you by DraftKings, where we highlight teams or players who stood out to us over the weekend. Tim, who is your Weekend Warrior?
I'm going to go, and this team only played one game on Saturday, so they didn't play Friday or Sunday, so it's just one game, one win, but so impressive. I'm going with the Indiana Pacers / Tyrese Halliburton, right? I can't really differentiate between the two. Put up 140 on the Knicks. And the Knicks are a team that, when I watch the league and I look around the league pass every night and I'm flipping around, some teams stand out as competing a little bit harder. I'm more physical on that end of the floor, and that's the Knicks. And so for the Pacers to just go for 140, no problem. 40 assists as a team in that game. It's a rare milestone when you see a team get 40 assists in a game. And obviously Tyrese Halliburton right now, what he's doing. He had 22 points, 23 assists in that game, 2 turnovers. He's got a 2-game stretch going with 45 assists and 2 turnovers. And they really did whatever they wanted to against a pretty physical Knicks team for the most part. So impressive. And the Pacers had a little bit of a lull, Gerald, after that in-season tournament run that they made. Had a little bit of a lull after that, and they have found their swag again. They're playing at that breakneck pace, really hard to defend, and Halliburton is the guy leading the way. And I just thought that was a very entertaining game and impressive to operate that way offensively against the Knicks.
The Pacers are such an interesting team to me because, obviously we know they're leading the league in offensive rating, number 1, putting up historic offensive efficiency on that end, number 28 in defense. So it really is a tale of one side of the basketball for them. But, they're also number 1 in our league pass hearts for a lot of people, I feel like.
Right.
And Tyrese, I know out here in Phoenix, the Suns had an opportunity to draft him back when they took Jalen Smith at number 10. And a lot of Suns fans out here are still kicking themselves that the front office did not take Halliburton because right now, he looks like a more modernized version of Steve Nash, honestly, with the way that he is able to orchestrate fast-paced offense, maybe a little bit more of a scoring mentality than Nash had. But he's so much fun to watch, and that whole team is just a blast to enjoy. I'm glad that they made it as far as they did in the in-season tournament so more people could be familiar with them. My Weekend Warrior, I'm going to go with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're a team that they've won 4 straight, and they've beaten some really quality teams along the way. They beat the Timberwolves, the Knicks, as you mentioned, a physical defensive team, the Nuggets with everyone but Aaron Gordon healthy, and then the Nets. All 3 of those were by double figures, and the other one was by 9 points. So they're kind of steamrolling their way through the league. Only 2 of those were over the weekend, obviously, but Tim, are we overlooking the Thunder a little bit? We're going to get into overlooked teams later in the show, but it feels like the Thunder are one of those young, fun teams but are we at the point where we need to start taking them seriously as a legitimate contender in the West?
I'm glad you chose them, Gerald, because I think we are definitely at that point, and it's really because for me of this stretch right now that we've seen,
Mhm.
because they're not just playing good teams and beating them, they're dismantling them, and the balance that they have, because this isn't like they're riding a heater at a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander right now, and who can be unguardable at times. That's not what this is. They're getting great balance. Holmgren is playing. He's been great all year, but he's now reached a whole nother level of production offensively. Jalen Williams has been spectacular throughout this. Lou Dort gives them, both ends of the floor, supplemental offense. So I just been so impressed with the way they're getting this across the board, and led by a great offensive player who has the ball most of the time. But they pass it, they defend, they play with great energy. I think they're very well coached. They're prepared, and I think now this recent run has elevated them now into the conversation in the Western Conference. Like, I'm at the point now where it's no longer you're thinking this is a team that got off to a really good start and let's see what happens. No, I think they're going to be in this thing. They're going to be in the top four in the West when this is all said and done. They're going to host a first round playoff series against somebody, and that is a very difficult environment for anyone to go in. Now, look, Gerald, the West is crazy, which means, you could end up like the Kings last year. They get home court, and your reward for doing that is the Golden State Warriors, right? Getting everybody back, getting Wiggins back, and and you have to play a four-time defending champion in the first round, because that's the way it worked out. And that could happen with some of these teams at the top this year. You might get a Phoenix team, you might get the Clippers. Like, you don't know who you're going to get in that first round, and are they healthy, and all of that firepower. So who knows what that means? I just think that they're going to host a series, and they are going to probably be favored because of how difficult it is to win there. So, yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, man, because even though Boston is the only team in the league with a longer winning streak right now, they've won 6 straight. No one in this league is playing as well as the Oklahoma City Thunder are right now. And that's what's been so impressive about this run. And we talked about Pacers being a team that, you must see. If they're on, you want to watch them just for sheer entertainment value. Kind of feel that way about the Thunder, except it's a combination of entertainment and am I watching this young team kind of grow into a contender right before my eyes? That's always a fun thing to do. So, excellent choice for your weekend warrior.
Yeah, they're an interesting team to me as well because a lot of people are going to point to the lack of experience for them when it comes to playoff time. Obviously, a lot of their core is younger and wasn't around, some of them, for that last playoff appearance they made back when Chris Paul was still on the team. But, they said a lot of similar things about a Suns team here in Phoenix that went to the finals just 2 years ago. A lot of their guys had never played a single playoff minute to that point. And obviously, that Suns team had a little bit of an easier path with the injuries. I think the West this year is going to be a bloodbath, like you mentioned. Like, there's no guarantee having home court advantage gets you a favorable first round matchup at all. But just the way that Shea is playing this year, he's replicating a lot of what he did last year. But I think the Thunder have one of the best, 25 and under trios in the league between Shea, Jalen Williams, and Chet. And Chet is not playing like your typical rookie. Obviously, he kind of redshirted last year, whatever you want to call it. But he has been phenomenal. I feel like he's kind of running away with this rookie of the year race, and just the fluidity of his game, the ball handling, the versatility of things he can do on both ends is not typical of a rookie that you would normally see. So the Thunder are interesting to me. I mean, they're one of 3 teams joining the Celtics and Sixers to be top 6 in both offensive and defensive rating. Like, they're a legitimately great team on both ends. So they're going to be fun.
And one other point I want to make on them, just to how
Mm.
impressive they have been, particularly, you mentioned, their top 3 guys, because that's what we talk about all the time, right? The
Mhm.
top tier talent on your roster isn't enough. So Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, both of those guys, I think initially were viewed as more of an impact right away defensively, because Chet Holmgren has tremendous instincts, right? He covers a lot of ground. He's a great shot blocker. When you watch him defensively, he's mature beyond his years in what he sees and the way his head is on a swivel, his communication ability. He's always early on his rotations, like little
Mhm.
stuff like that. Young players, they don't look like that. And Jalen Williams is a guy that has got the frame, the long arms. He's physical. He likes to get into guys. So you thought, okay, they're going to take some time to ripen as offensive players, and Shea's going to have to carry them most nights, but they're going to impact it defensively. Well, you look up, and these guys are averaging 35 combined. But more
Mhm.
importantly, Both players are at a 50, 40, 80 clip. Both of them. I mean, those are very difficult shooting numbers to attain, even for like a top shelf two guard. A 50, 40, 80 year, very hard to come by because 50% from the field is hard when you take a lot of perimeter shots. It's just a tough number to get to. 40 also from the three, difficult. 80 from the line, I guess, is a little bit more attainable. But for both of those guys to be doing it that efficiently, and giving you 35 a night between the two of them, and like I think they're both significantly better offensive players than they were the first month of the season. So they've grown even, as the season is going, they're so far from where their ceiling is. It's really exciting times for Oklahoma City, but it's spread out throughout. Isaiah Joe is a guy I love who comes in and shoots the heck out of the ball. Is a perfect role player for them. Spotting up Kenrick Williams gives him great minutes. Casey Wallace. So they're interesting. And we talked last week. Adam and I were talking about his team. And are they starting to now think internally, man, you know what? We're closer than we thought, like now. And do you parlay some of those picks that they have stockpiled into going after another top talent? Lauri Markkanen was the name that came up. So it's a really interesting discussion. And the way they're playing right now, there's also part of you says, well, don't mess with this at all. Like, let's just ride this and see what it looks like this year in the postseason. And then make a determination maybe in the summer what you need. So I think there's two lines of thinking with this team. And I think you can't go wrong either way, really. But I just know that they're quickly grasping everyone's attention in this league as a legitimate threat. And it's been fun.
Absolutely. And they're going to be a team to keep an eye on at the trade deadline. Isaiah Joe is a plus-minus god. So I'm glad that you brought him up because those numbers never cease to amaze me. But we're going to take our first break. After the break, we're going to talk about Suns Magic and the Suns possibly starting to trend in the right direction. But first, Emma, go ahead and take it away.
So I'm not Adam either, but all I want for the holidays this year is some NBA action. This week, new customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets, just for betting $5, an instant dub just for you. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code ALLNBA. New customers can get 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code ALLNBA. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available. For problem gambling, call 888-789-777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age varies in jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after insurance. See dkng.com/basketball for eligibility, deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
Special shout out to Emma for saving my voice. I am currently going through it with an illness, so she saved me through doing that whole ad read. Appreciate you, Emma. Let's talk about Suns Magic, Tim, because I know you had said you were looking forward to talking about some of these games from last night. Suns Magic was a great one between a Suns team that is starting to trend in the right direction and a Magic team that is one of the best defenses in the NBA, one of the surprises in the East. Tim, I'll kick it over to you. What stood out to you about this game between these two teams?
Well, okay. So first of all, first thing I noticed was the way that the Suns' energy was at the start of the game. And I'm not just talking about their starting lineup. It's the guys on the bench, the environment in the building. There was an electricity about it. And it kind of made me think, because I actually was pretty critical of Kevin Durant recently when Dallas and Luka lit them up for 50. And I thought Kevin Durant's body language in that game was horrific. And I thought I don't ever say that about Kevin Durant. The guy loves to play, and he'll show up and play against anybody. He'll take on 5 guys by himself, as he practically did in Brooklyn a few years ago when he played the Bucks in the playoffs. We know that the guy loves to play and he competes. And I just, I've always liked his demeanor. He's not a guy that's incessantly whining at officials. He doesn't yap his mouth a lot at other people. He just goes out and plays. That particular night, he didn't look like he believed that they had a chance. And then there was some discussion. Well, he's upset with he doesn't think the supporting cast is good enough. And I'm going, man, I disagree. I think the supporting cast and some of the pieces they've added, I think it's impressive to get a guy like Grayson Allen and get Nurkic and get Eric Gordon. I mean, these are guys that fit in really well with what you do. Josh Okogie's a guy that I like a lot. So I didn't agree with it, and I didn't like the way he played that night and how negative he was and how disengaged he was at times. So now fast forward to last night, and now Bradley Beal is back. So look, and I have a 2-year-old, and we just celebrated Christmas, so he got a bunch of toys. And the analogy I'll use is, some of those toys come out of the box, and they already have a battery in them, but it's kind of like run down a little bit. So he's got these little wooden trains, and it starts to go, and it's kind of going and puttering along. And then you go, okay, you know what? Let me go put a new battery in that thing. You put a new battery in it, and that train is flying around a track. That's what it looked like that Bradley Beal provided for them last night. It just looked like, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like now. We got all 3 guys. So they come out, and they hit Orlando with some haymakers, some runs, where those guys got cooking. The role players are playing well, and they get up 15 at one point in the first half, and you think they're gonna cruise. Give the Magic a lot of credit. First of all, this is a good basketball team, and I made some jokes about them earlier in the year. Like, let's see, when the bottom falls out on this hot start and everything else. No, they're better than that, and I'm going to be the first to admit it. They are better than that. Banchero is a future star. Franz Wagner is a really, really good player, and they've got great chemistry on that team, and they play really hard. So they didn't go away, and they actually came all the way back, took the lead in the fourth quarter before the Suns sort of settled matters. And the way that they settled the game was the reason that when they put these 3 guys together, I said this is going to be very difficult for anybody to stop. It's because of the mid-range play of their top 3 players, right? So mid-range, those off-the-dribble creative, get to 15 to 18 feet, pull up, shoot contested jumpers. They have 3 of the best mid-range players in the league currently. And I think in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, I think 2 of the best mid-range players of their generation, period. And you had Bradley Beal, who's a great mid-range. And that's where they got separation when they needed it, going to the mid-range pull-up game. Because it's the one area of the floor where they can't get double-teamed. It's very difficult to time your jump so you can contest that. When a guy knows when he's going to elevate and you don't, and you get a guy backpedaling a little bit because you're going off a live dribble, stop on a dime, elevate, shoot the basketball, it's really tough to get a real honest timed contest on that. And these are 3 great shooting strokes. So they're going to make a high percentage of those shots. And that is exactly what happened when they needed to have it in the middle of the fourth quarter. And that's kind of remind people, I think everybody reminds them of what this can be when this gets humming with 15, 20, 25 games under their belt together. You saw a little sample of it last night in the fourth quarter, and they were able to hold off a really tough, hard-nosed, competitive Orlando Magic team.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Like, obviously, it's only a 3-game win streak, and you could make the case like, okay, the Houston Rockets, they're around 500. That was the first win. Second win was the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, this was a legitimate playoff team, a very good team, and the third-ranked defense in the NBA. And the Suns were able to kind of build on the momentum that they had been building. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of the joy aspect of it. It is something that Bradley Beal touched on in his post-game comments about, the first couple of games coming back, I was so focused on the pressure of, returning from injury finally, because I've been out for most of the year, and showing people what this team can do. And I kind of lost the joy that I've had since I was a child playing this game. And you could see it on the Suns. Like, to your point, Kevin Durant's body language had been bad for those couple of weeks where they were really struggling. And I think it's been much better. Like, there have been some plays where he didn't jog back on defense. Flash forward to the other night, he's playing the passing lanes, denying near half court. And it's just little things like that where it's like, okay, as much as I think the idea that he was frustrated with his supporting cast has been overblown, when you're losing, the body language can get bad really quick. And I think one thing we underrated with this whole process is just kind of the mental and emotional blow of having this guy come back, and in his second game back, he lands on somebody's ankle and he's out for another 2 weeks. I'll use another Christmas analogy. About 10 years ago, I wanted nothing more for Christmas than a Nintendo Wii. I wanted the new Nintendo video game system. My parents were going to get it for me. And what they did was they printed out a picture of a Nintendo Wii and gave it to me and said, we couldn't get one. They were all sold out. but we're going to get you one as soon as we can. I feel like that's what Bradley Beal has been for this team. Like you can see what it's supposed to look like, but it hasn't gotten there yet. Thankfully, my parents were just playing the cruelest prank and they actually gave me the Nintendo Wii 5 minutes later. But like with this team, they haven't gotten that. So they've had to look at this thing and not be able to put it together. And I think now that it's finally whole, like Bradley Beal doesn't fix all of the issues we've seen during the win streak, but just having him back allows them to finally build continuity. The other game the other night was the first time they've had their top 6 guys available with Grayson and Eric and Nurkic as well. So I think the offense clicking as quickly as it has is not surprising. I think it's the defensive end, obviously, where they need more reps with their full rotation to build that continuity. But I am curious what you think of the Suns bench, because it's kind of had to be all over the place with guys in and out of the lineup. And right now, they've had Udoka Azubuike, a two-way guy, filling in as their backup center. They've had Saban Lee playing some minutes with Josh Okogie out. I'm just curious, what do you make of the Suns' supporting casts, especially with regards to that bench?
Yeah, well, first I want to say that was a pretty cruel prank your parents played on you, but I don't think it's as mean. One year, my 2 older kids, just to really mess with them, I wrapped up some household items from around the house. Like my son was like 4, he opened it up, and it was a box of Band-Aids, and like he thought that like that was a legitimate gift. You know, I think I gave my daughter a packet of like instant rice. They're opening it up, the looks on their faces, it was pretty classic. That was pretty mean. So your parents got you pretty good. So look, all right, so they're an interesting team because, like, take for instance last night. Just look at the box score, and you go, "Wow!" Like, there's guys that didn't even play that were playing significant minutes, like last week, that were like Bates Diop and Goodwin. These guys were playing, and Watanabe was he was in the rotation, playing a ton of minutes at the start of the year, and now they're just kind of relegated to cheerleader mode last night. Look, and part of the problem is, for those guys, is when you have Beal and Booker and Durant, you have 3 of those guys. Obviously, Frank Vogel's going to stagger their minutes in a way that they actually become your bench. Like those players, Durant, Booker, and Beal, they are also your backup at another position, because you're going to stagger those guys throughout the game. It's not like you got a point, a 2, and a center, or a point, a wing, and a center, right? And now those guys have specific backups because they do certain things on the court. Well, all 3 of these guys do pretty much everything offensively. They're just 3 elite level wings. None of them are real point guards, but I thought they did a pretty good job. Beal, Booker last night did a pretty good job handling the ball like point guards. The ball got hopping pretty well. Better. It was less isolation play than I've seen out of Phoenix at times this year. I thought they moved it pretty well and made good, quick, decisive decisions with it. The bench is a work in progress, I think, going forward, of what that would look like. For instance, a playoff series, and we're a few months away from having to figure that out. And who knows what they do at the trading deadline or anything else, and who they might try to get later on. If there's a veteran they want to add that they can sign to bring in for the playoffs, it remains to be seen. But last night it was pretty much just like 2 guys really playing the majority of those minutes. And Eric Gordon, he played 30 minutes, took 3 shots, which is shocking to me. I mean, he checks in the game. I feel like he's already taken 5 shots, and he took 3 in 30 minutes, and he didn't look comfortable really with how spread out those shots were. So they got to make sure he stays incorporated. He's going to be very valuable for them. But to answer your question, yeah, it's thin. We knew the bench was going to be thin, but I think it's still very much to be determined what ultimately that looks like and who grabs those minutes going forward. And for now, I don't think it's going to be a massive problem because of that starting 5. And one last point I want to make. If you didn't watch the game last night and you just pulled up the box score and you saw Grayson Allen's line, 10 points, 4 boards, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, a couple of steals, you think, okay, whatever, just a decent night, average night for a guy like Grayson Allen. If you watched the game and watched every play the way I did, I was so impressed with Grayson Allen's all-around game last night. He fights over picks. He's physical. He takes on a challenge. He's tough. He's competitive. He drives the ball to the basket. Like, he had some plays that didn't show up where he made a weak side slash, caught the ball in the lane, didn't have an opportunity, and then made the next pass. And maybe that led to a Another pass for a corner three, but none of it happens without his recognition of when to cut, what to do with it once he caught the ball, not force something at the rim. He had some driving shots. He had some standstill threes. I just thought, man, this guy really giving them something because of his all-around game, and he's never really been recognized for that at the NBA level. I was very impressed with Grayson Allen last night, and I think he really fits in well, and Nurkic as well. Both of those guys fit in well because you don't have to call anything for them, and they're still going to be highly productive because they're going to play hard, take advantage of their opportunities, and they're going to be smart about what they're doing offensively. So I just wanted to point that out about really both of those guys, but primarily Grayson Allen. I thought he played a great game last night despite his line maybe not being overwhelming.
Yeah, with Grayson, it's easy to get caught up in just the fact that he's, a top 10 3-point shooter in terms of efficiency. But to your point, he's been really good this season, especially with Beal and Booker being out for stretches, of adding the ball handling, the playmaking, the driving, especially like his ability to attack closeouts because teams are going to close out so hard on a top 10 3-point shooter is something that really makes a difference. There was a play in the first half where Beal drove, attracted a second help defender, kicked it out to KD. KD attacked the closeout, kicked it to Book. Book did the same thing, and it wound up in Grayson Allen's hands, and he wound up with a layup. Like, that's the kind of impact that he's able to make when he's sharing the court with those three, especially. He's kind of been slotted in as that fifth starter for the time being. And I think in 35 minutes, very small sample size, they're a plus 17 together, and they've shot the ball really well at like a 60% clip. So he's been pretty good filling out that spot so far. I think to your point, they still need to figure things out with Eric Gordon a little bit. It was only a couple of games ago that he got 2 shots and made those comments about, we need to share the ball. And he was kind of right in that regard. The offense was stuck in the mud. But then he goes from, a franchise record 14 made threes over a 2-game span to last night only taking 3 shots. So they've still got some things to figure out there. But I do think, like, we knew the bench would be thin. And come playoff time, you're only going to be playing 8, maybe 9 guys tops. They already have their top 6 locked in. I think now it's a matter of figuring out who gets those last couple of spots. And Frank Vogel, he said he's going to do his due diligence, getting different guys minutes, experimenting with lineups. So I think we're just kind of seeing that process play out. But I did want to ask you about the Magic because they're a team that's impressed me a lot. Younger team, defensive team, very long and lengthy team. What have been your thoughts on the Magic, one of the bigger surprises in the East so far?
They're an interesting team because they've got a number of guards on their roster, none of whom I don't believe are a natural point guard. Like I don't think Suggs is a natural point guard. I don't think Black is. I don't think Cole Anthony is. Gary Harris. None of these guys are natural point guards. They're sort of like combo guards, and I think most of those guys are more comfortable when they can get some shots and try to score. So despite that, they have these 2 players in Wagner and Banchero who can win matchups. And you saw Wagner go to work, in the second half of this game. He went to work. Any chance he got a switch, he got a chance to isolate. He's very good with the live ball, and he's got a good hesitation to his game. So he can get by people where he can stop and shoot a deep 3. Banchero, when he going into the draft, I said this is clearly the most ready for the NBA guy right now. Like his body type, his physicality, his bounce, his all-around offensive game, and you really have seen that from day one. He's had at no point has he looked like a guy that was remotely uncomfortable. And he saw it again last night. And there are times like, Durant is guarding him and really like down and in a stance and like digging in. And he's got a hand on him, a hand ready to go. You can see his readiness. And yet Banchero still got where he wanted to go against Durant. And it wasn't, there wasn't even an off factor there, which, could be there for a young player. This is Kevin Durant, man. Like, I'm sure Banchero really idolized this guy watching him when he was younger. And now here you are, you're playing against him and he's trying to lock you up and you're just so comfortable to go do what you want. And I've just been impressed with his versatility because he can post you. He can run out in transition and finish. He can shoot the ball off the dribble from deep. He's still a work in progress with his mid-range. I think that'll come though. And his handle is decent. It's not elite. He wants to continue to work on that and he could polish that up. So he's got a counter to great defense off the dribble. Now you have a guy that's a perennial all-star. So I just been very impressed with their team the way that they play, how hard they play, and the fact that they don't really have a guy that's got a ball on the hip, natural floor leader mentality amongst those guards. They're all just good players. It's impressive what they've been able to do. And sitting here 19-13, no way you could have come close to predicting that this team would be 19-13. I would have said at this point, 32 in, I would have said 12-20 would have been probably more likely in my mind. So I've been pleasantly surprised by them, and I really enjoy watching them play because they compete on every possession.
Yeah, Jamal Mosley's done a great job over there, and I'm glad you brought up the physicality with Banchero because he's averaging a lot of free throw attempts, which is something Kevin Durant pointed to. The fact that he only took, I think, 2 last night and still wound up getting the point total that he did. There was one play, the and one that he got against Yusuf Nurkic, where Nurkic, it looked like he was straight up, but that's a sturdy dude, and Banchero just went right into him, absorbed the contact, finished, looked perfectly poised in midair. And I was like, my God, this guy is a strong individual for him to be able to finish that type of play. And to your point, when he's got the 3 ball going, this is something KD mentioned as well. He was very complimentary of Banchero. When he's got that 3 ball going, he is a really difficult player to stop. But I really like this young Magic team. I feel like they are kind of, maybe to a much lesser degree, but they're kind of my Thunder of the East in terms of a young team maybe exceeding expectations in terms of making that next step. The defense, like you can't say enough about such a young group being third in defensive rating to this point. I was impressed with what I saw last night, especially because you had mentioned it earlier. Like the Suns threw them a lot of haymakers, and they were able to stay with it, knock down some threes, and take the lead back until the Suns were able to close them out late in that game. So I've been impressed with what I've seen from the Magic so far this season, and they're a pretty fun group. Anything left from this game before we move on?
Last bow I want to put on this. So, Phoenix is a team, it's been because of the Beal being out and also just their own play, even with Durant and Booker, pretty disappointing to this point, I think, the way their season has gone. And now they got Beal back. They win 3 in a row. You mentioned it. 2 of them, are basically bottom feeder type teams, lottery bound teams. This is a good win against the Magic. Still not a top tier contender that they've beaten. But if you want to know a lot more about Phoenix, I think, and what these 3 guys are capable of doing together, I think you're going to see that play out really over the next 10 days. So they got Portland tonight. That shouldn't be hopefully a difficult game for them, you wouldn't think. Then it gets into a nice little stretch here of some teams that are going to challenge them. You've got the Clippers at home, the Heat at home, Memphis at home, who just got Ja Morant back. Then you go to the Clippers. So you got 5 games right now, and some of those teams in that mix are teams that are either contender type teams or teams that, like a team like Miami, that is going to make you work, and they're playing really, really well right now. So I just think, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves with what we've seen out of Phoenix here just for a 3-game sample size with who they played, but it's encouraging what we've seen. Now there's a little bit more of a test here over the next 10 days that I think will tell us a lot more about ultimately how they stack up in the league and in the Western Conference.
Yeah, this is a critical stretch for them, especially with the number of games that they have at home on this homestand, the ability to be in their own practice facility and kind of build on that momentum. And we've seen it. Like there was a 3-game stretch there where Kevin Durant had 14 assists to 18 turnovers. And over the last 3 games, it's been night and day, 32 assists to just 4 turnovers. They've experimented with using him more on the ball, initiating offense, which has been fun to watch now that they have those other 2 guys to allow him to do so. They're going to be a team to keep an eye on over the stretch for sure. But we're going to take another break. On the other side, we're going to discuss the Lakers falling to 500 and what our thoughts on the Pelicans are. But first, Emma wants to tell us a little bit about Factor. So Emma, go ahead and take it away.
Alright, you guys. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm extremely busy, so Factor Meals comes in clutch every single time. If you guys don't know what Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service that can help you eat well for breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever you need. So you can cross like meal prepping off your list if that's something you don't want to be doing. Treat yourself to high quality, delicious meals. If you go on their menu online, you can like look through all of like their chef choices and all of that. My personal favorite is the breakfast or the smoothies. You can see below. Smoothies are really good. They also have protein shakes, which I didn't know about till recently. So good. So good. But anyway, head to factormeals.com/allNBA50 and use code ALLNBA50 to get 50% off. Guys, you're paying half price. Half price. This is an unforgettable deal. Half price. So again, that's code ALLNBA50 at factormeals.com/AllNBA50 to get 50% off.
Shout out once again to my old producer over at PHNX, Emma, for sparing my voice from having to read through these ads. Tim, let's talk some Lakers and Pelicans. Obviously, we're going to get to the Pelicans, but I feel like everybody wants to talk about the Lakers right now. They fell to 500 last night. I think since that 44-point beatdown of the Pelicans in the in-season tournament, I think they're 4-8 since then. Only a three-win improvement compared to this point last year when they got off to that awful, I think, 14-20 start. Are we concerned at all about the Lakers? Is this kind of what you expected from them, given their supporting cast? I want to get your thoughts on this team because obviously you've got LeBron James and Anthony Davis still playing at a high level. But for whatever reason, it feels like this team is kind of grasping at straws at how to put the rest of it all together.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think, the question always when you watch the Lakers is, like I watched last night and I'm saying, is this a team that I can truly envision winning it or making another run the way they did a year ago? And then they ran into just a significantly better team. Denver got swept, but they're there in the conference finals. So you get to the conference finals, you're who knows? You're one rolled ankle away from somebody of making a legitimate run. So you put yourself in the mix by doing that. So I'm watching them throughout the year, and part of me is always saying, well, they're impossible to judge in a regular season because they're not concerned with the regular season. You got your best players been in the league 20 years. He's not trying to put his foot on the accelerator every night and win as many games as he can. Anthony Davis is going to miss games and has a struggle at times, just consistently showing up with an aggressive mindset, right? So the regular season isn't as important to a team like the Lakers that's playing strictly to position themselves somewhere by the time they get to mid-April where everybody's healthy, and now they'll go take their chances. Even if they have to go on the road for 3 straight series, you only have to win 1 road game in a series, and you've got home court, right? So with LeBron James on your roster and Anthony Davis, like they think they're always going to be in a position where they can go pull that off. So they're not trying to win the race in the regular season. And so you always have to keep that in the back of your mind when you watch them. Having said that, last night, and look, we're going to get into Pelicans in a second, and I got a little bit of a rant about them. But the Lakers last night comparatively looked slow. They looked inept defensively. I mean, they're going to a zone at times because they couldn't guard them. They went to a zone defense for a stretch, and it just completely it looked like a zone defense that is never practiced. And like a couple years ago, the 2020 Lakers in the bubble employed a zone, and they had that giant front line, and it was really effective. And it became, I think, probably even unintentionally, they threw it out there like, hey, this is working pretty good. Next thing you know, they're playing all kinds of zone in the bubble, and they win a championship that way. Miami's a team that plays a lot of zone. They practice it all the time because it's part of their identity. It's not really a part of this Lakers team identity. And so it was a porous zone, and it just looked like we don't really know how to guard these guys, so let's try zone for a little bit. And I just felt like the Pelicans' best guys really were all operating at a super high level, and their role players gave them a ton of energy. Jones and Alvarado in particular, Valanciunas was banging. And then those 3 guys, McCollum and Ingram and Williamson, all of those guys had nights that looked like their best. So all of that stacked up against the Lakers, and you end up with a 20-point win. And really, the Pelicans got out to a lead. They kind of just kept them there, like stiff-armed them and kept them, 10, 12, 15 points most of the time. It was not a real threat at any point. And, the Lakers' three-point shooting, lack of, reared itself. They're minus 21 from the three-point line. It's hard to overcome that in this league. So even though I say like the regular season doesn't matter that much, we can't really judge them. the same time, there are certain nights when you feel like they're trying to play hard and they just don't have enough. And that's what it looked like to me last night. And that was one of the best Pelicans games I've seen this year. Like they just top to bottom, their entire roster, both ends of the floor. It was a very complete game on the part of the Pelicans. And there's been a lot of nights I haven't seen that out of them. When you add those two things up together, this is what you get, a 20-point win.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it was one of the better games I've seen from the Pelicans this season as well. And we'll talk a little bit about them, and I'll let you get to your rant. But for the Lakers, I mean, they've gone to this new lineup with Rui Hachimura in there, Torian Prince, LeBron, and AD, obviously, and Jared Vanderbilt. Just a lot of length. I think that group has a pretty good net rating. It's like plus 17 or something like that in very limited minutes. But to your point about them not being as concerned about the regular season, do you think all this experimenting with their starting lineup, with the injuries that they've had and having to throw out different lineups out there, do you think Darvin Ham is kind of playing that long game in terms of trying to get some sample sizes there that he can look at and say, okay, this works, this doesn't? Or does it really feel like he's kind of trying to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks?
Yeah, no, probably a little bit of both. And again, look, if they got bounced last year in the play-in, okay, or they got bounced in the first round and they go out in 5 games, and now you come into this year and you're 534 games in, there's probably a much more significantly increased sense of urgency on the part of Darvin Ham and the Lakers. Because at that point, you start to go, okay, you go 2 years in a row coaching LeBron James and Anthony Davis and you don't look like you're viable. Now you start to think about job security. Okay, so the fact that they were able to salvage their season at the end last year with the run they made to get to the conference finals, and then everybody acknowledges they just ran into the best team in the NBA, and that team won a championship. So you kind of go, okay, they're just not quite on that level. But it really made you forget about a lot of the warts and a lot of the issues that they had because they sort of reinvented themselves at the All-Star break, and then they made a run after that with some added pieces. And then Austin Reeves, second half of the year for Austin Reeves, I think he was a different player than he was the first half. So that's like almost adding another player to your roster, even though he's been there, because he started playing with that much confidence. And LeBron gives him that much confidence. So you add up all that stuff, D'Angelo Russell, like you add in those guys, and now it's like, okay, Hachimura, like, okay, it's salvaged the year, positive mindset. So now here you are, 34 games in, you're 17-17, and it's almost like people are giving them the benefit of the doubt that, okay, don't worry about it. You saw what happened last year. They still have LeBron, they still have AD. They can be a real threat in the West, and I think that's probably smart for us to view them that way. But I do think that Darvin Ham right now is probably trying to find plus minuses for particular groups of guys and give him a better sense of who needs to be playing more minutes together and what combinations to use. So I do think part of that is in there. And I just don't think the Lakers are going to care as much with that, that readiness, like up on the balls of your feet mentality that some of these teams have that are still desperately trying to prove something. I don't think the Lakers are trying to prove anything. They're just trying to stay together and then make a run with 2 great players. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, no, I see that. I did want to ask, because you mentioned Austin Reeves, like, are we good with bringing him off the bench? LeBron has hinted several times that he likes sharing the court with Austin Reeves. I think last night was the first time he played 30 minutes or more in like 7 or 8 games. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I'm torn on that because, I mean, clearly he's one of their, one of their top players. So you would think in this league that usually means you start, right? Unless you're just so, you're so dialed into your role that you've been on for a long, long time. As a 6th man and an instant offense type guy off the bench, and that's what this team is. That's not really who he is. He's an all-around player. I think you mentioned that how LeBron feels about him. I've said this before. I think other than Dwayne Wade and Kyrie Irving, I don't think LeBron James has ever played with another player that he entrusted more to handle the ball while he was on the floor. And think that's a big statement because I just mentioned 2 guys that are 2 of the best offensive talents this league's seen, Hall of Famers, and Austin Reeves is in that category. That's how much LeBron trusts him. The ball moves really well. It hops very well. And I think Darvin Ham is probably thinking, okay, I got LeBron and I got Austin Reeves. They're the two main guys that can create with the dribble and kind of make the right decisions. And I think he wants to stagger their minutes some, so that he's always got one of those guys on the floor at all times. But LeBron is saying, no, I think we can actually hit our peak and ceiling as a team, maximizing those minutes when we're out there together. So I think that's a kind of a work in progress. I would not be surprised if by the time we got to the end of the year and got into the playoffs, Austin Reeves is going to be starting for this team. I'd be very surprised if he's not.
Yeah, I feel like it's inevitable and kind of a temporary fix in terms of, like you said, always having one of them on the court, especially because they haven't had, Gabe Vincent a lot of the year. They've had guys in and out. So it feels like kind of a Band-Aid on those minutes where you have to stagger certain guys. I do want to talk to you about the Pelicans, though. You said you had a rant for us, so let's hear what you've got on the Pelicans.
All right. So let me start this with a question for you. Let's talk about the top teams in this league and just go up and down. If I said Boston, do you know who their best player is? Do you have a definitive answer on who Boston's best player is?
Yep.
How about Milwaukee?
Yep.
How about Philly?
Yep.
How about Denver?
Yep.
Okay. How about we'll go Golden State?
Yep. I'm sensing a trend here.
Lakers.
Yep.
Okay. So that's here's my rant about this. And look, maybe some people might view this as a good thing. I don't know who their best player is. I don't know who the Pelicans' best player is. Okay. And I watched. The reason I said rant because I was watching the game last night, and I've been critical of Zion because I don't think Zion Williamson plays hard enough all the time. I don't think he pushes himself. I think he coasts. I think he drifts. I think he jogs too much. Very rarely do you see him in a dead sprint in transition filling the lane, even when he's got the advantage and he's got the angle and he's up ahead a little bit. He kind of pulls up. He should be rebounding at a much higher rate than he does based on his strength and athleticism, particularly on the offensive glass. And then last night I watched him and I went, man, he played hard. Everything he did was a quick burst. He had a couple of plays. One in particular stood out to me. He got the defensive rebound. He started to push. He threw it ahead. I don't remember who the player was, but they missed the layup. And guess who tipped it in? Zion. And that is rare for him to throw it ahead. The ball's 30, 40 feet ahead of him. And he kept running. And he got all the way to the rim, and the guy missed the layup, and he tips it in. And I'm saying, why is it so hard to commit that level of energy every night? Because if he did that every night, my point being, that is their best player. But he's not their best player every night. And even just asking that, now before people like jump down my throat and say, well, Jason Tatum's not the best player every night either. That's not my point. You know for a fact it's a clear answer who's their best player. You know the answer to that. Yeah, you're right. Some like Jaylen Brown will outplay him. Maybe even Porzingis every now and then is the best player in that team. Maxey some nights can be the best player in Philly. Lillard in Milwaukee, I get it. Jamal Murray in Denver. Right, that happens. But when I ask you who the best player is, you're talking about the consistent level of excellence. Who sets the bar on that team? And there's an answer in every case. And there isn't one with this team. And there should be, because it should be Zion Williamson. But he leaves so much out there. There's more to grab for him. And he just doesn't do it consistently. And it frustrates me because I love watching him. And I think he's a good kid. I think he seems like a really good teammate. He's mild-mannered. He doesn't get too worked up about anything. But there's just more there for him. And I thought last night he was excellent. Everything he did was sharp and hard, and he used his physical talent to overwhelm them. Even one time posting up Anthony Davis and took a middle and shot a jump hook over him. Anthony Davis, 7 feet tall. And he did it like it was nothing. And I'm going, man, look at that when he's quick and decisive, how that looks. It's not there all the time. And I think that's why I have a problem with New Orleans sometimes, because I was like, you see them last night, you're like, clearly they have enough talent to contend in the Western Conference. Because I love their role players. I mean, I love their roster and all the things that those guys bring. I just don't know if Zion Williamson is committed to the level he needs to be their best player, which would give them a greater identity. And that's my rant on the Pelicans. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
No, that's a great point, and it's one of those things where you could ask a similar question of the Suns, but obviously, if you're choosing between Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, that's very different compared to Zion and Ingram and CJ McCollum. It's a different conundrum, and I feel like for Zion, he's been difficult to talk about because A, he's been injured a lot, and B, a lot of people go directly to body shaming instead of the more legitimate questions that we have now about like effort level, just straight up conditioning, like work ethic, that type of thing. And I think it's fair to ask, to your point, because of the inconsistencies that we see with him, because we know he's a God-given talent, and we know that when he supplies that effort, the second chance play that you were talking about in particular being a good example of that, like this team goes to another level. And the Pelicans are already kind of a scary team because they're so deep, because like we saw out here in Phoenix, how physical and scrappy the Pelicans can be in a playoff series when they took the Suns to 6 games in their 64-win season. Like that was without Zion. So you add Zion to the equation, you should think this team makes another leap. It just hasn't happened. But to your point, they have been better recently. I think since that 44-point drubbing they took against the Lakers in the in-season tournament, they're 7-3 since then, starting to move up the ladder a little bit in the Western Conference. And it's one of those, they're another example of why the West is going to be a bloodbath in the first round, because that's a team that might not have home court advantage, but is fully capable of coming into your arena and beating you up and stealing a game. So they're a tricky one to assess, but they are, I think, starting to head in the right direction.
It's such a great point. Imagine, being Minnesota or Oklahoma City this year with the years that they've had. And let's just say, for argument's sake, they hold on to the top 2 spots in the West. I'm not sure they will, but let's just say they will. And then you get Pelicans. Like, for instance, that's possible. Like, you could get a team like New Orleans rolling in there in the first round. It's like, whoa, they'll probably be higher than a 7 or 8. I mean, there's a good chance of that. But, and look, Brandon Ingram is nasty, right? He's filthy. He's 6'11", terrific mid-range contested jump shooter, right? And that's his game. That's his bread and butter. That sort of rock you, sleepy type dribble, and boom, he leans back, goes into that 18-footer, and it's unstoppable when he gets it going. So you've got elite level guard play with McCollum, who could be a combo, 1-2, great ball screen operator, which is what this league is. And he's really good at coming off ball screens tight, getting into the gap or getting into his shot. Definitely not necessarily a prototypical point guard. He's more of a combo guard, can really score it and then run the team when he needs to. So you got the point, you got the long wing, which is important, I think, in this league. And then you got the power player. Not a prototypical power package at the 6'7", but he's a power player. I mean, he plays like a center, basically, the way that he scores. So you've got each area of the floor covered. And I think for me, it's going to hinge on staying healthy, clearly, because Ingram's had his share of injuries too, and CJ's been banged up this year, and we know about Zion. So let's stay healthy first. But then I want to see the mantle get passed and like that torch grabbed by Zion. So he's the guy running out of the tunnel every night, and you're identifying him as the guy because he's going to consistently, on a bad night, he's going to go for 25. Because that's what the great players in this league do. Even on nights they have bad shooting nights, they'll get to the line, they'll figure out a way to get to their number, and then they're also going to find other ways to beat you. And even on bad nights, they'll still put together 8-10 points in the fourth quarter when you have to have it and win the game. Like, those are what the guys on those other teams we mentioned, that's what those guys all do. Zion is still like, you don't know exactly when you sit down to watch, what am I about to see? Last night, I thought, was one of the best games I've seen him play this year because he was committed to pressuring you when he got the ball, and he isn't always that way. And that's why they're going to be an interesting team for me to watch. And his growth and maturity level, and does it ever really click? And look, people want him to lose weight. I don't even know, man. His body type might not allow that. It's not even about that. It's about, okay, if you can only play 30 minutes, give me 30 hard minutes. Don't give me 30 minutes and 22 of those are hard, and 8 minutes you're kind of floating around while you're resting. Because that's what it looks like to me. He's always conserving himself. Go. go for it because he's an impossible matchup in this league because of just this unique physical package that he brings to the table. That's the challenge for Zion, and that ultimately I think will be the challenge for their team and whether or not they can win a round, or really threaten somebody in the second round where now they're in the mix as a contender. Right now, I think they're just on the outside of that.
Right. The Pelicans are fascinating to me for that reason because of the question mark about Zion. Like we saw it when the Suns played the Pelicans 2 years ago. We saw Brandon Ingram in his first playoff series kind of step up and be the guy without Zion on the court. And the Suns had they had Mikal Bridges and they had no answer for Brandon Ingram in that series. I'm curious if you get to the playoffs with Zion, does he make a similar leap? Is that complicated by the fact that Brandon Ingram has already done that sort of thing? It's going to be fun to watch. But for now, I think the Pelicans are one of my more slept on teams just because of that potential. But I am curious, is there a team that you feel, maybe it's one we've discussed, maybe it's one we haven't, that has been overlooked to this point? Because there are so many teams that fit that category in the West. But I am curious, is there anyone that has stood out as kind of your most overlooked team to this point?
I think probably the most overlooked team for me in the Western Conference would probably be the Clippers to this point because of the start that they had of guys being out, and now they're starting to play much better. And again, I was the whole time when even before they got Harden and they made the trade. I said it's not about Harden for me. Yeah, he gives them I think more options in the regular season as an elite offensive player because Kawhi's going to miss time. Paul George is probably going to miss some time at some point. That for me is not why I would ever buy into the Clippers. I buy into the Clippers because I think Kawhi Leonard's going to be healthy. Like if I'm willing to make that bet and slide some money onto that number on the roulette table that says Kawhi healthy, that's why you believe in the Clippers because of Kawhi Leonard being healthy. Harden gives them added depth offensively, but he has struggled in the postseason. So now this might be a great lane for him because he's their third best player. And that might be a great lane for James Harden, where he feels less pressure because it's going to be about Kawhi and Paul George if they get to that point. But we haven't just until recently started talking about the Clippers. And when you look at the talent up and down the roster, and it's their top guys we know about, but even like a guy like Westbrook, like just how hard he plays every night, no matter what role he has. I have so much respect for that brings something to your team. Zubac, Terrence Mann, like these guys fill great roles for them. So I'd probably them, and in the East would probably be the Heat. And we barely talked about the Miami Heat all year. They'd had a slow start. There's way sexier storylines in the East with what Boston did and adding guys, with Milwaukee adding Lillard. Philly gets rid of Harden, and they're better. Maxi's ascension. Like all these storylines. And then you got the Heat, who, by the way, played in the finals last year, and now they're getting their act together. So I don't think we've talked a whole lot about them in terms of, do you think they can win the East again? Because of how top heavy it's been, Milwaukee and Boston. But to me, watch them. They're lurking. They're sneaky. And they've got some really quality wins lately.
No, those are both great picks. The Clippers in particular, because it felt like after those first, 5 or 6 games, whatever it was, where they were really struggling to put together wins. I think they've won 11 of their last 13 games. They've really looked like a more dangerous team. And to your point, I think Harden is in a prime situation there because we all know about the playoff struggles and shortcomings when he's the number one or the number two guy. But if he's setting up Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, that takes a lot of pressure off of him to have those high scoring nights that, his past teams have needed from him in the playoffs. And that's the other thing is if you get one or two of those games in a playoff series, that can legitimately swing a series and make life easier on Kawhi and Paul George because go back to last year in Philly against the Celtics, I'm pretty sure the 2 games that he went off in that series were Sixers wins. So he's fully capable of doing it when there's less pressure on him. And I think they're one of the deeper teams in basketball. They've got all those wings. Like they're a legitimately scary team if they stay healthy. That's always been the big if for them. But I think this year we're starting to see it during the regular season, and it's contributing to more wins than we've seen in the past. Because in the past, it has kind of felt like they're like, let's just get to the playoffs and hopefully we'll be healthy, experimenting with all kinds of different lineups and whatnot. This year, it feels like there's a little bit more of a purpose. And to your point, like Russell Westbrook was great in the playoffs. They were out in 5 games, but he was great in the playoffs for them last year. And I think he just brings that different type of energy. As for the Heat, like it's so funny how we consistently overlook them as a team that's made the finals in 2 different surprising finals runs with Jimmy Butler as the guy. I do think there's a lot of focus on like Dame joining the Bucks and the Sixers being unleashed with a new head coach and Tyrese Maxey and all of his other teams like the Celtics, obviously the Porzingis trade. Those are the sexy storylines. The Heat upsetting some of those teams and doing it again would not be a sexy storyline. I feel like some people are trying to like block it from their mind that could possibly happen just because last year, Nuggets versus Heat was not everyone's favorite finals matchup out of what we could have had. But they are still a dangerous team. I think Bam Adebayo, pound for pound, one of the best defenders in the NBA. Jimmy Butler, we know what he's capable of. Like they've just got a solid supporting cast even after some of the players they lost in free agency last year. They're a very tricky team for me come playoff time. And Eric Spoelstra, like I feel like we've said this for years, but I don't think the guy gets enough credit for the tactical mind that he is and being able to incorporate all these new pieces year after year and still feel the team that is so competitive, so dangerous in a playoff environment.
Well, I've been on record for a while. He's the best coach in the NBA in my mind. And if you told me I had one group of guys, 12 players, whether you pick them for me or I get to pick 12 players, and I got to go out and I got to win either one game or one series starting from scratch, I'm taking Eric Spoelstra. That's the guy that I want to figure that out. And you're right, he does it. And Jaime Hawk has been amazing because you get a rookie that's this polished and mature. You plug him in like he's a 5-year vet. That's a great bonus. I'll finish with this. The bottom line is the Western Conference is insane because to me, there's only 3 teams in the West that aren't really interesting. I'd probably say Portland, Utah, and I'd say San Antonio, even though they have Victor Wembanyama. So if that makes him interesting to people just to watch him, maybe they're not even in that category because, it's kind of, wow, I haven't seen anything look quite like that before. I mean, I wouldn't mind watching the Spurs tonight. I'll put them in. But other than that, I'm talking about just interesting talent, storylines, personalities, whatever it would be. I think you got 12 teams in the West worth talking about. Because we didn't even get to like teams like Dallas. Who's got great players, one of the best in the league. The Kings, who were really kind of emerged last year, and they're sitting here now as we sit here now, they're 5th in the West at 19-12, very solidly placed. We haven't even discussed them. Lakers, Warriors, like what spot are they going to be coming at people from? At some point, think about the pedigree with those 2 teams. So the West is just insane. It's loaded. We're going to have probably the most compelling first round matchups we've ever seen in the Western Conference this year. Depending on how this plays out, you're going to have juggernauts going at it in the first round. It's going to be crazy. So this is just, the tip of the iceberg. Some of the teams we talked about today with New Orleans and the Lakers in the West and talking about those teams. It's just at Phoenix, that's really the teams we got into today in the West, but there's a whole long list of teams that deserve a lot of consideration. I'm sure week by week it'll be different who we hone in on.
Yeah, absolutely. 2024 is going to be a good year for hoops, especially once the Western Conference playoffs roll around. But I think that's going to do it for this special New Year's edition of the All NBA podcast. You can follow the show on Twitter at AllCityNBA. Adam will be back tomorrow as your normal host. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourguet. And of course, you can follow the legend Tim Legler at Legs ESPN. Until next time, we hope you all have a wonderful 2024. Thanks for watching.
Y'all silly like the mayor.